Hi, Tracy Lewis from Stuff and Things. I have this wonderful new stamp set that I want to color today. I bought this set to use for teaching some basic coloring at my card making classes. This is the set. It's called Hello Color. And this big rectangular one here is the one I have in mind for students to practice with. And then, you know, there's the feather. And if they want to do the flower. This is a border. Maybe you're supposed to repeat it. I haven't really used that one yet or given too much thought because the big one was the main one for me. So, this was one that I colored using four pencils actually. I used Bermuda Bay, Pacific Point, Basic Gray, and Basic Black, and the watercolor pencils from Stampin' Up is what I plan on teaching with. And I have two sets. My class sizes are very small. I teach in the Thousand Trails campground system and have a couple of students here and there coming and going. I've had as many as 5, and at that point there will have to be some sharing involved. Each kit I put in a blender pen because that's how you get the really nice color blends from the light to the dark, and even with the color differences from the Bermuda Bay to the Pacific Point, you use the blender pen to get the blending. I also really like to use Wink of Stella. This one has Wink of Stella on it. I can't tell if you can see it or not. And then I also like to use a white gel pen, which you can't see here too much, but it is there. I also made a Christmas one out of Real Red and Old Olive. And this Christmas one has some gold pearl pen dots on it. I like to use white for the lightest, and I like to go very dark on my darkest. That's what I think makes coloring most interesting, when you start with the whitest white and you just leave some spaces white. And in both cases on these coloring projects I did. And then I have one here, and I thought I would go from start to finish on it. And I have to decide what colors to use. I am thinking of going yellow, orange, red, and maybe the olive green. So we'll try that. We have the blender pen, and I will get going. So I like to figure out what I'm going to keep as the whitest whites. And for today, I still am liking these sections of thin lines. I think I'm going to leave those all white. The dots I will also leave white this time, though I think I'm in both other times. Now I left the dots white on the Christmas one. So we'll start with that, and I always start, I prefer to do a really light shade, so I'm going to just start with this being the green. And I just want to lay down some very light color. It doesn't have to be perfect. I do not want to go hard enough to put any depressions. I'm using 140-pound watercolor paper so that I can get heavy with the blender pen and not have to worry about oversaturating the paper. The regular papers that Stampin' Up sells, like their Whisper White and their Shimmer White, I find for what I'm used to using, they don't have a very high saturation level for ink or water. So when I'm doing coloring, I pretty much either go with, if I'm using Copic markers, I go with a Copic type paper that can handle a heavy saturation of the alcohol ink. And then in this case, so see, I've just covered, and I'm very light. I'm not adding any dents in the paper because that's my goal, is to avoid that. So that's my first layer, and I could decide to take the blender pen. These blender pens have been used. And the tips will stain, but you can just run like so to make sure that it's clean, and the previous color will wipe off pretty readily. So I'm just getting a light olive green tone going with the lightest layer. And I do want to make sure that I blend the entire area. I find with this blender, it's a little bit easy to forget to blend the entire thing evenly. And my goal is to go for something really smooth looking. I'm actually, if you've used Copic markers, I'm actually shooting for that kind of a smooth look. I'm not going for a watercolor look. If I was going for a watercolor appearance, I would use the Aqua Painter tool. I would not use the blending tool. So for me, the blending tool is to go for a very even looking blend. So to me, that looks nice and even for a base. And I could decide I wanted to do my darks, or I could start with just getting some basic lights. So like I could leave that alone, and I could move on to say orange. And I could say that I want this section orange. And I could get the base down, have it all be a nice light layer evenly, and then go back after the darks. Now keep in mind, I'm already leaving my lightest lights with no color, so that's how I'm achieving the light. So initially, when you do your coloring, it'll look pretty flat until you really go after getting the shadows in and deepening those shadows. Now this was a green, so I'm going to show you that you can wipe off the green and go right in. This orange pencil has not been used, so what it's doing is even though I was trying to use the side of the pencil, I can still see some really sharp, narrow marks. So I prefer a dull pencil if I'm just laying down a base of color. It almost would mean that I could use 2 sets of pens, keep one set with the sharps for later to go in, and then another set that are dull for doing the base coloring where I'm just trying to get the color down. But this is actually smoothing out. Those sharp marks that I see are blending nicely. So again, I'm just trying to make it as even as possible. That's pretty even. I'm going to go in here with the yellow. I don't think the yellow's been used too much either. But see, it goes pretty fast for the base coat. So I think once I get these 3 colors, I'm going to go back in and show some shading. All right, so I once again going to clean my pen end. I pretty much keep my hand in the same position, and you'll see that I rotate. I don't arc my hand into other positions, mainly because my hands have had a tough life. I've had surgery on them to fix them from some painful conditions, and so my goal is to just be as loose with my hand and just keep it kind of not, I want to work it as little as possible to keep it as healthy as possible. Because I craft a lot, it does mean, okay, so now I might do one more big element with the red. So we have a lot of colors that we can play with getting the light to dark. So you can really see the effect as you add your layers. Okay. So there's our lightest base coat. Done on those four. So now I will go back in with my green, and I established to myself what my light source is going to be, and then kind of pretend like I'm pretending that this black line is raised and it is behind it causing a shadow. So that's what you're seeing me put into place is my shadow here. And then working with this blender pen, it works a little bit counterintuitive to me. So I'll show you what I do with it to work on the darks. At this point, I have no choice but to maybe put some dents in because I'm going pretty dark. And this 140-pound paper is pretty dense. It's thick and it's a little bit knobby. I am using the smooth side, I should point that out. That's the knobby side. And this is the smoothest side, but it still has a texture to it. So I purposefully use the dark, or the smoothest side, to make it easier to work with my colors. Now if I'm using watercolors, I tend to want to use the other side. So I'm also adding some dark along the top in the swirl just because I'm liking that offset look. And I'm wanting, this is like a middle dark, and I'll probably go back in and do one more really dark. Okay, so now if I need to smooth any of that out, I'm just cleaning my nib before I go in. I want to push the dark down, and so I'm putting the blender on the lightest part. If I go and stick the blender into the dark, it's going to moosh the dark out. So I'm actually pushing the dark. See, you can see that I'm pushing it down into the shape I want it to be. There you go. So I'm adding the shape. I'm pushing the dark away from the light is what's happening. And that's how these blender pens work. They're a little bit counterintuitive. It's not that I want to go in with, if I go right in there in the wet, in the dark, it's going to push the dark away and leave a light spot, which we don't want. So, I am pushing the dark to where I want the dark to be, away from the light, which is giving us more contrast. Now in this case, I kind of want this to be a little more rounded. So again, pushing the light away, and I'm actually also moving it off to the side in this case. I can actually see the dark pooling at the end, being pushed away from the end of the tip of the blend. Okay. Oh, and I want to get in here and push this dark down a little bit out of the way. Same with right here. It ends up making some nice lights, which is what I'm after, are the light lights and the dark darks. Now, I've made a mistake here. I'm going to clean this. This is a little mark. I am pushing it away, and now it's gone. So it's as easy as that to, if you think of the blender, and this is so similar to Copics, that you use its blender pen to push the color away. And that's how I'm using this blender tool, is like I would use a Copic marker blender tool. Alright, so now I want to go in. I see a couple of areas of green that need still a little more green. And these pencils, unlike an alcohol marker, where an alcohol marker feels really squishy, and really soft, these pencils feel very waxy and hard. If it's just hard to explain how they feel. They don't have a soft feel at all like a pen to me. Okay, now I want to work more on the orange. And I think on the orange, I like the starburst effect. So I'm going to get some, oop, this is red. We wanted orange, but we might end up going back in. If I've already got red, I probably want to go ahead and do a little red all the way around to make it the same. Now I can go in with the orange and do sort of the starburst look that I'm thinking of. Now in this case, because I'm doing pencils, I can do more of the area without worrying about drying like a pen. you have to worry about drying time and doing your work where the paper is moist. And in this case, I don't have to worry so much about that because these are pencils. All right, so now I'm going to clean my... And I'm going to go and I'm going to start pushing the color down. Going for that kind of starbursty look. Okay, so I have some lines that I went over, and I'm going to take my marker. First I'm going to clean it. See, there's a lot of orange. The orange and the red are a real strong color. And I want to push away. See that? I don't know if you can see. So there's the areas inside the circle that went over. I think those are red too. And I'm going to push that away. And now if you look carefully, that's gone. So the blender pen can also fix mistakes. It's not going to do so good if you have multiple colors. It'll probably mush the colors. But in this case, I want this to be no color here, at least for now, and I'll let that dry, and I could go in and add a color later after it's dry. But oh, and there's another little spot that I went over, so I'm going to fix that. There you go. So I just fixed some mistakes. Now let's go in and get our yellow. Now yellow might need a little help. This might already be as dark as I can get it. So let's just see what the yellow is. I've not worked with the yellow yet. And I want to try to do dark between the stitch and the wall, the solid line. Let's see if I can do that. What I'll do if it doesn't work and doesn't show up enough is I'll go back in with some orange to help get that dark. But I actually am seeing it almost is turning orangish on its own as I get that dark going, and so I like that. Very happy with how that's coming out, having not used this color in this set yet. Very nice, love it. Okay. Okay, and before I blend that, I'm just gonna there's no need to wait or be in a hurry, I mean, because it's wet. This is all done with pencil, so I can leave that untouched and go right to my last color and start getting some darks going with the red. All right, so now all four of my colors have lights and darks. Getting rid of the orange. And I'm gonna play a little bit with this red here. pushing down against the dark that I added on. Smoothing everything out. Alright, now I can go back. So here, look at how red, you can see the red. Pretty strong. And now I'm going to go and push on the yellow. Push it back and smooth it out. The yellow looks pretty good to me. I really like how the yellow has a definitive, darker, almost orange, without having to use the orange, which I thought for sure I was going to have to use to get these really dark darks. So I'm very impressed. All right, that's all I'm going to do. I don't want to overwhelm you all. I will finish coloring this, but I wanted you to see the dark darks and the light lights. Now let's put up one that's finished with the dark darks and the light lights. It even has the white of the gel pen, and it also has the wink of Stella on it that is hard to catch. There you go, that's the wink of Stella happening. Alright, I hope you found this beginning coloring using the watercolor pencils from Stampin' Up. Alright, I have finished coloring everything in. Now I wanted to go in with some white. Add some white accents. I'm going to do the white a little bit differently this time. And I might want something soft underneath. So this is going to be a little bit bumpy looking. I have it magnified, so hopefully you can see exactly what I am doing. I have found that the white so far does not go on opaque like I would hope it does. It goes more opaque over markers because the pencil has a waxy surface. I find that some of the color shows through, the pencil color. So I'm going to try to get some accents going here. Between the light and the dark. This is a little bit of an experiment. Now I can see this, but I'm not sure if you can. And so I can't see what you can see. I'm also using the white to fix a couple of my mistakes. This is another alternative for fixing mistakes. And then I see a part that I didn't blend. There we go. Yeah, once I see the blended parts, then the non-blended sections show up. Pretty obvious to me. It's kind of one of those things that I could nitpick it and nitpick it forever before I call it done. Different marker. I see another section that I hadn't blended. I'll let that dry. So the whites, let's see if you can see that, are pretty subtle. I can see where I've got my lines going. I see where I've got some dots going, but nothing really bright and vibrant. I probably would need a white opaque paint to really have it show up vibrant like on the waxy surface. But what it does to my eye is sharpen the edges and then soften where I've put the dots. And it definitely fixed the dots in the red. Like this was red and it is now white. So we'll probably work it a little bit more and then come back and show you what the finished product looks like. Okay, I'm back, and I wanted to walk through the first two projects before we look at the one I just finished coloring that I walked through with you guys, my coloring process. So there's this one. I went ahead and matted this one that I hadn't matted before, just a different way with a larger border, because I wanted you to see what the latest one. So here's these two. And then this is the one that I colored with you guys walking through my process. And I think that the matting on it brings out the bright colors and looks lovely. So now I have these 3 completed examples that I will use. Sorry, I have my phone magnified here. There, so there's all 3 of the samples that I have for students to look at to get inspiration after I go through and give them all of the tidbits on the ways to use the colored pencils. Thanks for watching.